Imagine a city so loud that you cannot hear yourself think. Carts rattle over cobblestones, iron wheels grinding against stone. Church bells ring out the hour, clashing with the shouts of merchants selling eels, wool and spices. This is London in the early summer of 1348. It is a living, breathing beast of a city. It is crowded, it is dirty, but it is vibrantly, undeniably alive. Now, imagine that same city 6 months later. The bells have stopped. The carts are gone. The only sound you hear is the wooden creak of a wagon collecting bodies and the low, terrified whisper of a prayer behind a shuttered window. Welcome to the London Gritty Chronicles. In this series, we are reconstructing the years 1348 and 1349. We are looking at a city under siege. Usually, when we use the word siege in history, we mean an army surrounding a castle, cutting off food and water. That is a military siege. But here, we are using the word metaphorically. Listen to that word, metaphorically. It means we are using a comparison to help you understand the feeling. London was not surrounded by soldiers. It was surrounded by an invisible enemy. A disease that forced people to hide, to lock their doors, and to fear the very air they breathed. To understand this story, and to learn the precise English language of restriction and breakdown, we must first look at the victim before the crime. We must look at the city of London at its peak, just before the fall. The year is 1348. King Edward III is on the throne. England is confident. They have won great battles in France. The mood in the capital is high. But the most striking thing about medieval London is the density. Density means the amount of people packed into a specific space. London is incredibly dense. The population is perhaps 70,000 people, maybe more, all crammed into 1 square mile inside the old Roman walls. Picture the streets. They are not wide avenues. They are narrow, winding alleys. In some places, the houses on the left and the houses on the right lean toward each other. The upper floors stick out so far that they almost touch in the middle. This architectural style blocks out the sun. It creates a permanent shadow in the street below. For an English learner, this is a perfect setting to practice vocabulary related to space, or the lack of it. We can say the streets are congested. To be congested means to be blocked up or filled to excess. The market at Cheapside is congested with traders. The River Thames is congested with ships bringing wine from France and wool to Flanders. This congestion is not just annoying, it is biological tinder. Tinder is the dry material you use to start a fire. In 1348, London is a pile of human tinder, waiting for a spark. The people live in close proximity. Proximity means nearness in space. You smell your neighbors cooking. You hear their arguments. You breathe their air. Hygiene is different here. It is not that medieval people are filthy by choice. They simply lack the infrastructure we have today. Waste flows in open drains down the center of the street. Animals, pigs, chickens, even cows, walk through the city. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, animal manure, and unwashed bodies. Historians often describe this atmosphere as miasmatic. In the 14th century, doctors believed that bad smells, or miasma, caused disease. They were wrong about the mechanism, but they were right about the danger. The conditions were perfect for an epidemic. But the threat does not start in London. It arrives from the sea. Let us travel southwest, away from the capital, to the coast of Dorset. The month is June, or perhaps early July, 1348. The port is called Melcombe Regis. Today it is part of a town called Weymouth. It is a typical summer day. The sea is calm. A ship appears on the horizon. It is a merchant ship, likely coming from Gascony in France, or perhaps the Channel Islands. The people on the docks do not know that this ship is carrying a cargo that will change the world. History is often full of these accidental twists. A single moment that seems normal, but leads to catastrophe. The ship docks. Sailors jump onto the wooden pier. They are unloading goods, perhaps wine, perhaps cloth. But they are also bringing ashore an unseen passenger. We are talking about the bacterium Yersinia pestis. Of course, in 1348, no one knows what bacteria is. They simply know that in the lands to the east, in China, India, Egypt, and Italy, a great mortality is killing everyone. Rumors have been swirling for months. Notice the verb, swirling. Rumors swirl like smoke or water. They move around, changing shape, hard to catch. Merchants whisper that cities in Italy are empty. They say ships drift in the Mediterranean with no one alive at the helm. But in England, these are just stories. Until the ship arrives at Melcombe Regis. Within days of the ship's arrival, people in the town begin to fall ill. It starts with a fever. Then, the terror sets in. They find swellings on their bodies. These swellings are called buboes. This is where we get the name bubonic plague. The buboes appear in the groin, the armpit, or the neck. They are hard, painful lumps, sometimes the size of an apple. They turn black. This is the sign of certain death. The reaction in Melcombe Regis is immediate panic. And here we see the first English verbs of flight. To flee means to run away from danger. The healthy people flee the town. They pack their belongings. They abandon their homes. To abandon is a strong verb. It implies leaving something behind forever, or leaving it without protection. They abandon their sick relatives. They abandon their businesses. They run inland, toward the villages and the open country. But this is the tragic irony of the plague. By fleeing, they do not escape the disease. They become the vehicles for it. A vehicle is usually a car or a cart, but in medicine, a vehicle or a vector is the thing that carries the disease to a new place. The refugees from the coast carry the infection into the English countryside. They walk along the dirt roads, heading north and east, heading toward the larger towns, heading eventually toward London. The speed of the spread is terrifyingly fast by medieval standards, yet slow by ours. It travels at the pace of a walking man or a galloping horse, roughly a mile or two a day. As the summer of 1348 fades into autumn, the pestilence, that is the old word for a fatal epidemic, moves relentlessly. It is like a slow-moving tide of dark water. News reaches London before the disease does. The Bishop of London sends out letters asking for prayers. The mood in the capital shifts from bustle to unease. Unease is a feeling of anxiety or discomfort. You know something is wrong, but you cannot see it yet. The markets are still open, but the chatter is different. People look at strangers with suspicion. Is he sick? Where did she come from? This is the beginning of social breakdown. Before the first person in London dies, the trust between people begins to fracture. To fracture means to crack or break. The social bond fractures. It is now late autumn, 1348. The rains have started. The roads are muddy. And somewhere in the chaotic, crowded streets of London, perhaps in a tavern by the river or a bakery near the city gates, the first victim collapses. The siege of London has begun, but the citizens do not realize that the walls cannot keep this enemy out. In fact, the walls will only serve to keep the death in. How does a city of 70,000 people react when they realize they are trapped in a cage with a killer? The answer involves a total transformation of daily life, a rewriting of the rules of existence. It begins not with a scream, but with a shiver. It is November 1348. The London fog is heavy, mixing with the smoke of thousands of hearth fires. Inside a cramped timber house near the Thames, a child complains of the cold. The mother touches his forehead. It is burning. This is the moment the siege moves from the map to the living room. In the previous part, we watched the disease travel across the countryside. Now, it is intimate. It is inside the home. To understand the horror of 1348, you must understand the architecture of the medieval home. Most Londoners do not live in stone castles. They live in tenements. Listen to that word, tenement. It refers to a room or a set of rooms forming a separate residence within a house or block of apartments. In modern English, it often implies a run-down, overcrowded building. In 1348, a tenement is a vertical trap. The ground floor is a shop or a workshop. Above that, the family sleeps, often in one or two rooms. Above that, perhaps an apprentice or a servant sleeps in the attic. The floors are made of wood and straw. The walls are wattle and daub, woven sticks covered in mud and dung. This construction is crucial. It is porous. To be porous means to have small holes that allow liquid or air to pass through. These houses breathe. They share sounds, smells, and rats. The black rat is the silent roommate of every Londoner. They live in the thatched roofs. They run between the walls, and they carry the fleas that carry the plague. When the rat dies of the plague, the fleas get hungry. They jump. They find a new host. In the crowded tenement, the nearest warm body is a human. As the winter sets in, the infection rate in London begins to climb. At first, it is a slow accumulation. 1 death in a street, then 2, then a whole household falls silent. This brings us to the vocabulary of restriction. As fear spreads, people begin to restrict their movements. To restrict means to put a limit on something, to keep it under control. Neighbors stop visiting neighbors. The bustling hospitality of the medieval city freezes. If you see a door closed during the day, you do not knock. You cross the street to avoid walking near it. This is a specific type of movement called evasive action. To evade means to escape or avoid. You evade the tax collector. You evade the angry dog. Now, you evade your own friends. The markets, which are the heart of London's economy, begin to change. The noise drops. People buy what they need quickly and leave. There is no lingering. To linger means to stay in a place longer than necessary because you do not want to leave. Nobody lingers in the market anymore. We see a new emotion taking over. suspicion. Suspicion is the feeling that someone is guilty of something, or that something is dangerous, even without proof. If a merchant coughs, the customers recoil. To recoil is a physical verb. It means to suddenly spring or flinch back in fear, horror, or disgust. Imagine the scene at the baker's stall. The baker hands over a loaf of bread. His hand shakes. The customer sees a dark spot on the baker's wrist. Is it dirt? Or is it the token, the sign of the plague? The customer recoils. The bread falls into the mud. No one picks it up. This is the psychological siege. The enemy is potentially everyone. During this early phase, the authorities, the mayor and the aldermen, are confused. They try to keep order. They issue proclamations to clean the streets, believing the smell is the killer. They try to enforce hygiene. But you cannot sweep away a bacterium with a broom. The biological reality of the disease mirrors the social reality. Inside the body, the bacteria attack the lymph nodes, the defense system. Outside, in the city, the disease attacks the social nodes, the markets, the churches, the taverns. These are the places where society functions. And these are the places where the infection spreads best. Let's look at a key English phrase for this situation. Social fabric. The fabric is the material, the cloth. The social fabric is the invisible web of relationships that holds a community together. In late 1348, the social fabric of London is beginning to tear. The weather turns colder. Winter usually stops diseases. People hope the frost will kill the pestilence. This is a common belief. Cold air purifies. But the bubonic plague is resilient. And inside the warm, packed tenements, the rats and fleas are comfortable. By Christmas 1348, the death toll is rising sharply. The graveyards inside the city walls are filling up. And here we encounter a logistical nightmare. Logistics refers to the detailed coordination of a complex operation involving many people, facilities, or supplies. Usually we talk about military logistics or business logistics. Here, we're talking about the logistics of death. In a normal week, a parish might bury 1 or 2 people. Now, they must bury 10, then 20. The ground is hard and frozen. The gravediggers are overworked. And then, the gravediggers themselves begin to die. This creates a terrifying loop. The bodies pile up, the fear increases, the isolation deepens. People begin to barricade themselves in. To barricade is to block or defend with an improvised barrier. They lock their heavy wooden doors. They shutter their windows. They try to seal the house against the air outside. To seal means to close something securely so that nothing can get in or out. They stuff rags into the cracks around the windows. They hang herbs, rosemary, lavender, sage, to filter the air. Inside these sealed houses, the atmosphere is suffocating. Families are trapped together. If one person gets sick, they are all doomed. There is no hospital to go to. The home becomes the hospital, and then the home becomes the tomb. This is the shutting in. It forces a breakdown of the daily routine. There is no work. There is no school. There is only waiting. Waiting is a passive verb, but in this context, it is an active torture. You wait for a headache. You wait for a chill. You check your children's bodies every morning for the telltale lumps. The city is holding its breath. The high death rates of the summer have not even hit yet. This is just the prologue. The winter of 1348 is the time of dread. Dread is different from fear. Fear is a reaction to immediate danger. Dread is the deep, heavy anticipation of something terrible that is coming in the future. London is drowning in dread. As the year 1348 comes to an end, the city is a different place than it was in the summer. The confidence is gone, the noise is dampened, and a new, dark industry is rising. The industry of mass burial. How does a city cope when the mechanisms of religion and ritual break down? When there are too many bodies for the priests to bless? This is where the true chaos begins. In January 1349, the siege breaks through the last defense, the church. For a medieval Londoner, life is hard, but the afterlife is forever. The most terrifying thing about this disease is not the pain, it is not the boils, it is the fear of dying without a priest. To understand this fear, we must learn the phrase, last rites. The last rites are the final prayers and blessings a priest gives to a dying person. In 1349, people believe these words are the passport to heaven. Without them, your soul is in danger. But in the freezing weeks of early 1349, the priests are dying faster than their flock. Picture a parish priest. He is exhausted. He visits a house to comfort a dying woman. He breathes the same air. He touches her hand. 2 days later, he is dead. The church door is locked. There is no one to ring the bell. This leads to a spiritual crisis. The machinery of salvation has stopped. To stop is a simple verb. Let's use a more precise noun. Cessation. Cessation is the fact or process of ending or being brought to an end. We see the cessation of normal burial. We see the cessation of mourning. Usually, a funeral is a slow, respectful procession. Family members walk behind the coffin. They cry. They wear black. Now, the sheer volume of bodies makes this impossible. Volume here does not mean loudness. It means quantity or amount. The volume of the dead overwhelms the system. To be overwhelmed means to be buried or drowned. If a wave crashes over a boat, the boat is overwhelmed. London is overwhelmed by corpses. The small graveyards next to the local churches are full. They are packed so tight. Bones from old graves are pushed up to the surface. It is a gruesome sight. The authorities realize they have a sanitation disaster. They must act. They cannot wait. We now move to a specific location, East Smithfield. Just outside the city walls, near the Tower of London. A wealthy knight, Sir Walter Manny, sees the crisis coming. He buys land for a new emergency cemetery. Archaeologists have excavated this site. To excavate means to dig out and remove earth carefully to find something. What they found tells a heartbreaking story of discipline and collapse. In early 1349, bodies in East Smithfield are laid out neatly. They are in rows. They face the correct way. This shows Londoners tried to maintain order. They tried to keep their dignity, but as the weeks go on, the discipline fractures. The rows become messy. The bodies are thrown in on top of each other. This is a mass grave. A mass grave is a single large hole where many bodies are buried together, often without individual coffins. It is the ultimate symbol of a society that has lost control. The English language has an adjective, indiscriminate. If you discriminate, you choose carefully. You pick this one, but not that one. The plague is indiscriminate. It does not choose. It kills the beggar, the merchant, and the abbot in the monastery. However, it is not entirely equal. The poor, living in the crowded tenements we saw in Part 2, die in higher numbers. They cannot escape. They cannot isolate. Let's look at the word decimation. We often use it to mean total destruction, but historically, it comes from the Latin word for 10. It means to kill 1 in every 10 people. London is suffering far worse than decimation. It is facing depopulation. To depopulate means to substantially reduce the number of people in an area. By February 1349, entire streets are silent. The shops are shuttered. The windows are dark. Imagine walking down Cheapside, the main market street. Usually it is a riot of noise. Now you hear the wind rattling a loose sign. You hear a dog barking in an empty house. The silence is heavy. It presses down on you. This silence changes the psychology of the survivors. They enter a state of fatalism. Fatalism is the belief that all events are predetermined and therefore inevitable. If your time has come, it has come. You cannot run. You cannot hide. So, some people stop running. A strange thing happens. Instead of praying, some Londoners go to the tavern. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. This is a coping mechanism. A coping mechanism is a strategy a person uses to deal with stress or trauma. Some cope by praying constantly. Others cope by drinking and gambling. They spend their money because they do not think they will live to save it. The economy begins to behave strangely. With so many people dead, there are fewer workers. But there is still gold and silver in the city. The value of labor is about to change forever. Before the economic revolution, we must survive the spring. Winter was cold, but spring brings a new danger. As the temperature rises, the fleas become active again. The second wave of the attack is about to begin. The city is a graveyard. The survivors are traumatized. The government, guilds, and law are trying to hold on. They are trying to enforce rules in a lawless time. How do you punish a criminal when the jailer is dead? How do you collect taxes from a ghost? In Part 4, we will look at the collapse of the workforce and the rise of a new, desperate power among survivors. The poor are about to discover they are suddenly very valuable. Spring arrives in London in 1349 with cruel beauty. The sun warms stone walls, trees in churchyards bloom. But the city itself is paralyzed. Paralyzed means unable to move or function. A person can be paralyzed by a spinal injury. A city is paralyzed by the loss of its hands and feet, its workers. In Part 3, we watched the bodies pile up. Now, we must look at the empty spaces those bodies left behind. Imagine a master weaver. He owns a workshop. Usually, the air is filled with the clack, clack, clack of looms. He has 3 apprentices and 2 journeymen. A journeyman is a skilled worker who is paid by the day. But this spring, the loon is silent. The apprentices are dead. The journeymen have fled to the countryside. The master weaver stands alone. He has orders to fill, but he physically cannot do the work himself. This brings us to a fundamental concept in both economics and history: scarcity. Scarcity is the state of being in short supply. Gold is valuable because it is scarce. Air is vital, but not scarce, so it is free. In 1349, for the first time in centuries, human beings are scarce. The peasant, the laborer, the ditch digger, these people were once considered cheap. They were replaceable. If one died, there were two more waiting for his job. But suddenly, the math has changed. The supply of workers has crashed. The demand for work, harvesting crops, baking bread, shoeing horses, remains. When supply is low and demand is high, the price goes up. The surviving workers realize this. They look around. They see the empty fields. They see the desperate masters. And they do something shocking. They ask for a raise. To ask for a raise means to request more money for your work. In the modern world, this is normal. In the feudal system of 1349, it is revolutionary. The feudal system is a hierarchy. A hierarchy is a system where people are ranked one above another. The king is at the top. The nobles are below him. The peasants are at the bottom. The peasants are supposed to stay at the bottom. They are supposed to be grateful for whatever they are given. But fear breaks the hierarchy. A reaper, a man who cuts grain, approaches a landowner. The crops are rotting in the field. No one to harvest them. The landowner says, "I will pay you 2 pennies a day, as usual." The reaper shakes his head. "No, I want 4 pennies, and I want lunch included." The landowner is furious. This is extortion. Extortion is the practice of obtaining something through force or threats. But the threat here is not violence. The threat is silence. The threat is doing nothing. If the landowner refuses, he starves. So, he pays. This shift in power terrifies the ruling class. The rich are used to controlling the poor. Now, the poor have leverage. Leverage is a mechanical term, using a lever to lift heavy objects. In negotiation, it means having an advantage. The death of 40% of the population gives survivors massive leverage. King Edward III and his council watch from outside the city. They are panicked, seeing social order collapsing. In June 1349, the king issues a famous law, the Ordinance of Labourers. An ordinance is an authoritative order or decree. This law is an attempt to freeze time. It commands everyone under 60 must work. They must work for wages received in 1346, before the plague. It makes it illegal to ask for more money. It also makes it illegal to pay more money. Think about the desperation of that law. The king is trying to use ink and parchment to stop the laws of economics. Does it work? No, it fails completely. The economy has gone underground. An underground economy is one that operates in secret, outside the view of the government. Masters pay their workers extra money in secret. They give them food, clothes, or tools to hide the wage increase. They have to. The alternative is ruin. This creates a strange atmosphere in London. The streets are dangerous. The disease is killing people. But for healthy survivors, there is a sudden, wild opportunity. A young man, once a starving servant, can now demand good wages. He wears better clothes, eats meat. This is the paradox of the Black Death. A paradox is a situation that seems impossible because it contains two opposite facts. The paradox here is that while the population is devastated, the standard of living for the survivors actually goes up. But they have to survive the summer first. As June 1349 heats up, the smell in London becomes unbearable. The shallow graves are exposed by the sun. The miasma returns with a vengeance. To do something with a vengeance means with great force. The plague returns with a vengeance. The government tries to clean the city. They hire rakers, people whose job is to rake muck and filth. Usually a low-status job. Now, rakers are essential, paid highly to remove waste that might carry sickness. But the fear is evolving. It is no longer just fear of death. It is fear of the other. Strangers are targeted. Outsiders are blocked at gates. Jewish communities in Europe are massacred, falsely blamed for poisoning wells. In London, with no large Jewish community, hatred finds other targets: foreign merchants, beggars, anyone who does not belong. We see the vocabulary of exclusion. The city becomes a fortress, not of stone, but of suspicion. Yet inside this fortress, life continues. People fall in love. Babies are born. But birth and marriage rituals are hurried. No big weddings. A couple might pledge their troth in a quiet room with only 2 witnesses. They do not know if they will be alive next week. Marry in haste, repent at leisure. That is the old saying. But in 1349, there is no leisure. There is only now. In Part 5, we will explore the strangest twist of all. As the city empties, nature takes it back. We look at London's physical transformation when maintenance stops. What happens when grass grows in the streets? The most terrifying sound in a city is usually a siren, scream, or explosion. But in London, in the summer of 1349, the most terrifying sound is birdsong. Why is birdsong scary? Because you should not be able to hear it. London is usually a roar of humanity. To hear a skylark or thrush in Cheapside means the roar has stopped. It means the city is empty. In Part 4, we saw the survivors demanding higher wages. Now we must look at the stage they are walking on. The physical city of London is changing. It is decomposing. To decompose means to break down or rot. Usually, we use this word for organic matter, like fruit or flesh. But here, we can apply it to the city itself. A medieval city is a high-maintenance machine. Maintenance is the work needed to keep something in good condition. Patch the roof, clean the gutter, fix the road. When 40% of the workforce dies, maintenance stops. The city begins to fall into disrepair. This is a useful phrase. It means to gradually get into a bad condition due to neglect. Neglect is the failure to care for something properly. Walk through London streets in August 1349. Look down. Cobblestones are usually polished smooth by shoes and cartwheels. Now, there is moss growing between them. There is grass. This is nature encroaching on the city. To encroach means to intrude on a person's territory or rights, or to advance gradually beyond usual limits. The forest is encroaching on the capital. The boundaries between the wild and the civilized are dissolving. Pigs and cows, usually with owners, now wander loose. They break into gardens, eat human vegetables. They sleep in abandoned churches. This creates a surreal atmosphere. Surreal means bizarre or dreamlike. It does not feel real. Imagine a cow walking up St. Paul's Cathedral steps. It's funny, but a sign of deep disorder. The buildings themselves are suffering. Medieval houses are made of timber and clay. They need heat to stay dry. Without fires in the hearths, the damp gets in. The wood begins to rot. The thatch on the roofs begins to sag. To sag means to sink or hang down under weight or weakness. The roof of a dead family's house sags like a tired shoulder. This physical decay mirrors the psychological decay of the people. They look at their city and they do not recognize it. It looks like a ruin, even though they are still living in it. London is becoming a dilapidated capital. The famous London Bridge, the only way across the river, is vital. It has shops and houses built on top of it. If the bridge collapses, the city dies. But who is fixing the bridge? The wardens are dead. The masons are dead. The survivors look at these crumbling structures and feel a profound sense of impermanence. Impermanence is the state of not lasting forever. They realize that everything they built, their stone churches, their sturdy walls, is fragile. Fragile means easily broken or damaged. Civilization is fragile. But amidst this ruin, the summer heat brings a new horror. The plague has not left. It has just changed its rhythm. In the heat of August, the smell of the city is overwhelming. The waste piles up in the streets. The kennels, the open drains, are blocked. Stagnant water pools in the alleys. Stagnant water is a breeding ground for flies and disease. The city is becoming a swamp. And yet, the English language gives us a verb for what nature is doing: reclaiming. To reclaim means to get something back. Nature is reclaiming the land that the Romans and the Saxons took from it 1,000 years ago. For the survivors, this is not a beautiful process. It is a siege. They are trapped inside the walls. But the enemy is growing up through the floorboards. They begin to wonder, is this the end of the world? Many people believe it is. They look for signs in the sky. They look for answers in the Bible. And this leads to a dangerous explosion of religious extremism. If the normal prayers did not work, maybe extreme prayers will. Reports begin to arrive from the continent. Groups of men are marching toward England. They are called the Flagellants. These men believe that if they punish their own bodies enough, God will stop the plague. They whip themselves until they bleed. They march in processions, singing dark hymns. The Londoners watch them with a mixture of horror and fascination. They are fascinated because, in a world where everything is out of control, the Flagellants seem to have a plan. The plan is pain. This brings us to the concept of penance. Penance is voluntary self-punishment inflicted as an outward expression of repentance for having done wrong. The city feels it has sinned. The weeds in the street are the punishment. The empty houses are the punishment. So, how do you fix it? You must suffer more. We will witness the arrival of the flagellants and the dark, violent mood that takes over the city. The fear turns into anger, and the anger needs a target. The sound is rhythmic, like a drumbeat, but it is wet. It is Michaelmas, late September, 1349. The air is crisp, and marching through the gates of London comes a sight that stops the breath of every citizen. They are the flagellants. In Part 5, we saw the city overgrown with grass, a silent ruin. Now, that silence is broken by a terrifying chant. A long line of men, perhaps 100 or more, walks 2 by 2. They wear white robes with red crosses. They are barefoot, and in their hands they hold scourges. A scourge is a whip with several strands. Often the strands have knots or pieces of metal tied to the end. They walk to St. Paul's Cathedral. They form a circle. They strip to the waist. And then the ritual begins. They beat themselves. They beat the man in front of them. They sing hymns in a strange language. This is a spectacle. A spectacle is a visually striking performance or display. This spectacle is for salvation. The Londoners watch in a trance. They are desperate. Nothing has stopped the death. So, when these men offer a solution, pain, the people listen. This brings us to the word atonement. The flagellants believe that the plague is God's punishment for the sins of the world. Therefore, only blood can wash the sin away. It is a transactional view of religion. They give God their pain, God gives them life. The English language captures this intensity with the word fervour. The flagellants have religious fervour. It is contagious. For a few weeks in late 1349, London is gripped by this strange hysteria. People weep in the streets. They throw coins at the feet of the bleeding men. They believe the miracle is finally here. But the miracle does not come. The rats do not care about the whips. The fleas do not understand the hymns. The death rate slows down simply because it is getting cold again, not because of the blood. And this is where the mood shifts from awe to something much darker. Resentment. The Londoners feel cheated. They have suffered so much. They have prayed. They have watched these holy men bleed. And still, their children die. When fear cannot find a cure, it looks for a target. This introduces one of the most important concepts in history and sociology: the scapegoat. A scapegoat is a person or group who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others. The word comes from the Bible. Who caused this? It cannot be God, because God is just. It cannot be us, because we are penitent. So, it must be them. Them is always the outsider. On the continent, in France and Germany, this logic led to the horrific massacres of Jewish communities. Thousands were burned alive. In England, the Jewish population had been expelled by King Edward I in 1290. So, the Londoners turn their suspicion elsewhere. They look at the foreign merchants, the Flemish weavers. They look at the beggars. They look at the old women who live alone with their cats. The atmosphere becomes toxic. Toxic means poisonous. The air is toxic with disease, and the conversation is toxic with rumors.
I saw him by the river at night.
She whispered something to the bread. We see a rise in xenophobia. Violent skirmishes break out. A brawl in a tavern, a beating in an alley. The authorities, the mayor, the sheriffs, are terrified of the flagellants now. The church calls them heretics. A heretic is someone who believes something that goes against the official teaching of the church. The king orders the flagellants to leave. But the psychological damage is done. The city has seen that even extreme holiness cannot save them. Disillusionment is a feeling of disappointment. The Londoners are disillusioned with the church, the king, and with God. As the winter of 1349 approaches, the great mortality finally begins to fade. There are simply fewer people left to kill. The epidemic curve flattens. To flatten means to become level. The graph of death stops climbing and starts to fall. But the city that emerges from the smoke is not the same city that went in. The survivors look at each other. They are the remnant of London. They are traumatized. But they are also, strangely, liberated. Liberated means set free. They are free from the old rules and old wages. The plague is ending, but the social revolution is just beginning. We will see how the English language itself changes, and how the survivors begin to spend their new money in ways that shock the moralists. The era of the golden age of the labourer is about to dawn. The silence of the grave is broken by the sound of a coin hitting a wooden table. It is 1350. The worst of the dying is over. London is waking up from a nightmare to find that the world has turned upside down. Now we see them doing something unexpected. They are shopping. To understand this new world, we must learn the word upheaval. The Black Death was a social upheaval. The survivors look around. They see empty houses. They see fields full of unharvested grain. And they see that the people who used to tell them what to do, the lords, the bishops, the rich merchants, are just as dead as the beggars. The rigid class system of medieval England, which had stood for centuries, has cracks in it. Let us return to our ploughman. Before the plague, he ate pottage and dark, coarse bread. He wore a rough tunic made of hemp or wool. Now he walks into a tavern. He does not ask for pottage. He orders roast meat. He orders white bread. He orders ale. And he pays for it with coins he demanded from his desperate master. This is the beginning of the golden age of the laborer. But in economic terms, the survivor is a king. Historians call this a shift in standard of living. For the English peasant, the standard of living rockets upward. To rocket means to increase very rapidly and suddenly. Why? Because land is plentiful, but labor is scarce. The value of a man with a strong back has doubled, perhaps tripled. The elites, the nobility, and the wealthy merchants are horrified. They look at these peasants wearing colored hoods. They see a blacksmith's wife wearing a fur lining in her cloak. To the medieval mind, this is a violation of the natural order. The natural order is the belief that God put everyone in their specific place. If the peasant starts acting like a merchant, the universe is out of balance. So the government strikes back, not with swords, but with laws. We are entering the era of sumptuary laws. Listen to that word, sumptuary. It relates to laws that limit private expenditure on food and personal items. No servant shall eat meat or fish more than once a day. No laborer shall wear cloth worth more than 4 shillings per yard. They are trying to legislate status. Status is the relative social, professional, or standing of someone. They want to freeze status in place. But here is the English lesson. You cannot legislate against reality. The laws are flouted. To flout means to openly disregard a rule or law. The people flout the sumptuary laws. They have survived the end of the world. They are not afraid of a fine. I am alive, the survivor says. I will wear the red hood. This defiance changes the personality of London. It becomes a more aggressive, more confident city. The deference, humble submission and respect is gone. We also see a shift in language itself. Before 1348, the language of power in England was French. The king spoke French. The courts spoke French. The schools taught in French. English was the language of the uneducated. But the plague was indiscriminate. It killed the French teacher. It killed the French-speaking priests. It killed the French-speaking lawyers. Suddenly, there are vacancies. A vacancy is an unoccupied position or job. Who fills these vacancies? Men who speak English. We start to see the ascendancy of the English language. Ascendancy is occupation of a position of dominant power or influence. Slowly, inevitably, English begins to creep into the schools and the courts. If the plague had not happened, you might be watching this video in a dialect of French right now. But let's go back to the streets of 1350. The city is still physically damaged. We saw in Part 5 how nature was reclaiming the buildings. Now, a new construction boom begins. But it is different. It is ostentatious. Ostentatious means characterized by vulgar or pretentious display, designed to impress or attract notice. The new wealth wants to show off. Merchants who survived enlarge their houses. They build new chantries, small chapels where priests pray for the souls of the dead. They are terrified of purgatory. Purgatory is the place between heaven and hell where souls go to be purified. The survivors feel guilty. Why did they live when so many died? This is survivor's guilt. To assuage, meaning to make an unpleasant feeling less intense, their guilt, they pour money into the church. They pay for candles. They pay for statues. They pay for new windows. So, London begins to look different. It is a patchwork. A patchwork is a thing composed of many different elements so as to appear variegated. You have a ruined tenement next to a brand new, ostentatious merchant's house. You have a mass grave covered in fresh grass next to a busy market selling silk and spices. The economy is volatile. Volatile means liable to change rapidly and unpredictably, especially for the worse. Prices go up and down wildly. One week, grain is expensive because there are no reapers. The next week, it is cheap because there are no mouths to feed. This volatility makes people anxious. They do not save for the future. They spend for today. We see a rise in gambling. We see a rise in tavern culture. The alehouse becomes the center of the community. In the alehouse, people talk. They complain about the king. They complain about the taxes. and they realize something dangerous. There are more of us than there are of them. The seeds of rebellion are being sown. To sow means to plant seeds. The plague has planted the seeds of the peasants' revolt, which will explode 30 years later in 1381. But the anger starts here, in the ashes of 1349. The English language captures this mood with the word unrest. Unrest is a state of dissatisfaction, disturbance, and agitation in a group of people, typically involving public demonstrations or disorder. London is in a state of simmering unrest. Simmering means staying just below the boiling point. The water is hot, it is moving, but it has not boiled over yet. In Part 8, we will look at how the city tries to rebuild its population. We will meet the new immigrants. London has always been a city of immigrants, but after the plague, it becomes a magnet. People flood in from the countryside to take the empty jobs. We will learn the vocabulary of migration and integration. London is a biological machine. Like any machine, it requires fuel. And for a city, the fuel is people. In Part 7, we saw the survivors enjoying their new wealth. But money cannot bake bread. Money cannot weave cloth. You need hands. By 1350, London has a desperate labor shortage. A shortage is a state or situation in which something cannot be obtained in sufficient amounts. There is a shortage of bakers. There is a shortage of brewers. There is a shortage of wives. The city is a vacuum. A vacuum is a space entirely devoid of matter. In physics, nature abhors a vacuum. It rushes to fill it. And so, the Great Migration begins. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another with the intentions of settling, permanently or temporarily, at a new location. Usually, people migrate because they are pushed away by war or famine. But in 1350, they are pulled by opportunity. Word spreads to the villages of Essex, Kent, and Surrey. In London, the rumours say, a man can earn 6pence a day just for carrying bricks. In London, a woman can run her own shop. This creates a rural exodus. Exodus is a mass departure of people. The young, the ambitious, and the desperate leave the farms. They pack their small bags. They walk the muddy roads toward the smoke on the horizon. For an English learner, this is the perfect time to learn verbs of movement. They flock to the city. To flock means to congregate or mass in a large group, like birds. They stream through the gates. To stream means to move in a continuous flow, like water. They surge into the empty tenements. To surge means to move suddenly and powerfully upward or forward. But why is this migration so revolutionary? Because of a specific medieval law. There is a custom in England. Town air makes you free. If a serf, an unfree peasant tied to the land, can manage to live in a city for a year and a day, without being caught by his lord, he becomes a free man. Before the plague, lords would chase runaways. They would drag them back. But now, the lords are dead or distracted. The enforcement mechanisms have broken down. London becomes a sanctuary. A sanctuary is a place of refuge or safety. Thousands of young people arrive. They look at the empty shops. They see the help wanted signs. though in 1350 these would be verbal cries, not written signs. The guilds are forced to change their rules. A guild is a medieval association of craftsmen or merchants, often having considerable power. Before 1348, it took 7 years to become a master. You had to be an apprentice. You had to wait. Now, the guilds are pragmatic. Pragmatic means dealing with things sensibly and realistically. "We need a blacksmith now," they say. "Forget the 7 years. Can you hold a hammer? Good. You are hired." This leads to a rapid integration. Integration is the action or process of integrating, combining, or mixing groups. The old Londoners mix with the new arrivals. Accents blend. Dialects merge. The city becomes a melting pot. But it is not all smooth. There is friction. Friction is the resistance that one surface or object encounters when moving over another. In society, friction means conflict or disagreement. The older survivors look at these newcomers with suspicion. "They do not know the city," they say. "They do not know the pain we suffered." This creates a divide between the old guard and the new blood. The old guard are the veterans. They survived the siege. The new blood are the energetic replacements. They are optimistic. They did not see the bodies piled in the streets. However, the city itself teaches them quickly. London is still dangerous. The sanitation is still poor. The new immigrants often fall sick, not with the plague, but with dysentery or fever. We call this attrition. Attrition is the process of reducing something's strength or effectiveness through sustained attack or pressure. The city kills people almost as fast as they arrive. But the influx continues. An influx is an arrival or entry of large numbers of people or things. The population of London begins to recover. It does not reach its pre-plague levels. That will take centuries. But it stabilizes. To stabilize means to make or become unlikely to give way or overturn. The ship has stopped sinking. As the city fills up again, the noise returns. The hammers ring, the bells chime. But the psychological scar remains. A scar is a mark left on the skin or within body tissue, where a wound, burn, or sore has not healed completely and fibrous connective tissue has developed. A psychological scar is a lasting emotional injury. The people of London now live with a permanent anxiety. They know that death can come from the air at any moment. This changes their art. It changes their stories. We see the rise of the danse macabre. The danse macabre, or dance of death, is an artistic genre of allegory on the universality of death. Paintings appear on church walls. They show skeletons dancing with kings, bishops, and peasants. The message is clear. Memento mori. Memento mori is Latin, but it is a concept you must know in English history. It means, remember that you must die. This is not a depressing thought to them. It is a clarifying thought. To clarify means to make a statement or situation less confused and more comprehensible. The plague clarified what was important. Gold is not important. Titles are not important. The soul is important, and the moment is important. So, the new London is a city of urgent vitality. Urgent means requiring immediate action or attention. Vitality is the state of being strong and active. Energy. They live urgently. They drink the ale. They marry the girl. They build the house. Because they know the winter is coming. In Part 9, we will look at the long-term legacy of this trauma. How did the Black Death change the English language forever? We will trace the words that were born in the shadow of the plague and how the Great Mortality paved the way for the modern world. History is not just dates and battles. It is a chain reaction. A chain reaction is a series of events where each event causes the next one. The Black Death was the spark that started a chain reaction that is still felt today. In Part 8, we watched the survivors rush to London to fill the empty jobs. In Part 9, we look at what happened when they stayed. We look at the legacy of the plague. A legacy is something left or handed down by a predecessor. The legacy of 1349 is not just bones in a pit. It is the English language itself. Before the plague, English was a second-class language. It was the vernacular. The vernacular is the language or dialect spoken by the ordinary people in a particular country or region. In 1348, the king spoke French. The laws were written in Latin or French. If you wanted to be powerful, you had to speak French. But as we discussed, the plague killed indiscriminately. It killed the French tutors. It killed the Latin scholars. Suddenly, there was a void. A void is a completely empty space. Who filled the void in the schools and the courts? Teachers who only spoke English. Lawyers who had to make themselves understood by a jury of survivors who only spoke English. This forced a transformation. Transformation is a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance. The English language began to absorb words from French and Latin, but the structure remained English. It became a robust, flexible tool. By 1362, just over a decade after the plague, Parliament passed the Statute of Pleading. It said that all lawsuits must be conducted in English because the French tongue is much unknown in the said realm. Think about that. The disease killed so many French speakers that the government was forced to switch to English. This is a direct result of the biological disaster. If 1349 had not happened, English might have remained a peasant dialect for centuries longer. The plague accelerated history. To accelerate means to begin to move more quickly. The plague accelerated the rise of the middle class. We mentioned the sumptuary laws earlier, the laws trying to stop people from wearing fancy clothes. These laws failed because the economic reality had changed. We moved from a society based on status to a society based on contract. This is a vital distinction for history students. Status means you do what you do because of who you are born as. You are a serf, so you farm. Contract means you do what you do because you agreed to it for money. The survivors of the Black Death were the first large group of Englishmen to negotiate contracts. They realized their labor was a commodity. A commodity is a raw material or primary agricultural product that can be bought and sold. Their time was a commodity, their skill was a commodity, and the price was going up. This led to a new sense of individualism. Individualism is a social theory favoring freedom of action for individuals over collective or state control. Before the plague, the community was everything. After the plague, the individual survivor became the focus. I survived. I matter. I will make my own way. This attitude terrified the old establishment. They called the workers arrogant and greedy. But the workers were simply being rational. To be rational means to be based on or in accordance with reason or logic. It is rational to sell your labor to the highest bidder. The legacy of the plague is also visible in the architecture of London. The great cathedrals stopped being built for a while. The style changed. It became simpler, less decorative. Why? Because there were fewer master masons. This style is sometimes called perpendicular Gothic. It emphasizes vertical lines. It is stripped back. It is austere. Austere means severe or strict in manner, attitude, or appearance. The art became austere. The humor became darker. But amidst this darkness, there was a strange resilience. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Toughness. The city of London did not die. It adapted. To adapt means to make something suitable for a new use or purpose, to modify. London adapted to a smaller population. It adapted to higher wages. It adapted to a new language. The survivors developed a thick skin. This is an idiom. It means an ability to ignore criticism or insults. But in this context, it means an ability to endure hardship without collapsing. They had seen the worst thing imaginable. After you have seen the carts full of bodies, a bad harvest or a high tax does not scare you as much. This hardened generation raised the next generation, and that generation would go on to challenge the king himself in the peasants' revolt of 1381. So, when you look at the modern world, a world of contracts, of social mobility, of English speaking, you are looking at the distant echoes of 1349. An echo is a sound or series of sounds caused by the reflection of sound waves from a surface back to the listener. The Black Death is the shout. The modern world is the echo. But we have one final question to answer. We have reconstructed the siege. We have seen the breakdown. We have seen the rebuilding. Now, we must ask, what does it feel like to walk away from the disaster? How does a city decide that the emergency is over? In the final part, Part 10, we will close the chronicle. We will walk through the gates of London one last time, looking back at the city that survived its own extinction. We will summarize the key vocabulary of survival, and we will say goodbye to the ghosts of 1348. The year is 1351. The emergency is technically over. The king has recalled Parliament. The courts are open. But as you walk through Bishopsgate, you notice something missing. The crowd is thinner. The noise is lower. There are gaps in the row of houses like missing teeth in a skull. In this final part of our chronicle, we are looking at the aftermath. Aftermath is the consequences or after effects of a significant, unpleasant event. Usually, it refers to the new grass growing after a harvest, but in history, it means what is left behind after a disaster. How does a city decide the siege is over? There is no white flag. There is no treaty signed with the bacteria. It happens gradually. Gradually means taking place or progressing slowly or by degrees. One morning, a shop opens its shutters, then another. Then a cart arrives with apples from Kent. The rhythm returns. But it is a different rhythm. It is a tentative rhythm. Tentative means done without confidence, hesitant. The city is hesitant. Is it safe to breathe yet? Is it safe to touch a stranger? The survivors of 1348 have learned a brutal lesson. They have learned that civilization is a thin veneer. A veneer is a thin, decorative covering of fine wood applied to a coarser wood. Civilization is a veneer over chaos. The plague peeled it back and showed them the skeleton underneath. But they also learned endurance. Endurance is the fact or power of enduring an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. We often think of history as a list of kings and battles, but the real history of London is the history of endurance. It is the story of the unnamed baker who kept baking bread while his neighbors died. It is the story of the priest who kept visiting the sick until he collapsed. These people did not have antibiotics. They did not have germ theory. They had only their grit. Grit is courage and resolve, strength of character. As we look back at the reconstruction of this siege, we see three distinct phases of vocabulary that we have learned. First, there was the vocabulary of restriction. We learned words like isolate, quarantine, seal, and barricade. These are the words of fear. They are the words of people trying to stop the tide. Second, there was the vocabulary of breakdown. We learned words like contagion, cessation, overwhelm, and collapse. These are the words of failure. The systems broke. The walls failed. Third, and most importantly, there was the vocabulary of resilience. We learned words like adapt, recover, surge, and leverage. These are the words of the future. The London that emerged in the 1350s was a scarred city, but it was also a wealthier city for the survivors. It was a more English city, and it was a more questioning city. The blind obedience to authority was gone. The seeds of the modern world, where your worth is determined by your skill, not your birth, were planted in the mass graves of East Smithfield. So, the next time you walk through a crowded city, listen to the noise. Hear the sirens, the chatter, the footsteps. Do not be annoyed by it. Be grateful for it. That noise is the sound of a city that is alive. It is the sound of a system that is working. In 1348, that sound stopped. And for those who lived through the silence, the return of the noise was the sweetest music in the world. History is not just about what happened. It is about how people felt when it happened. By learning the precise English words for their fear, their loss, and their hope, we honor their memory. We do not just study the siege, we survive it with them. Thank you for joining the London Gritty Chronicles for this reconstruction. The gates are open. The bells are ringing. The city endures.